There has been an ever-growing debate or even war between different fractions or just fans in general about the subject of how certain established or well-established characters should and should not be approached or interpreted, making the possible solutions or answers more and more seem like an impossibility. And I've always felt like that the answer to these questions of how these characters should be interpreted or should not be interpreted was very simple to begin with. And in this video, I will be discussing and dissecting what I believe how certain established characters could and couldn't be approached by artists and creators alike. But first of all, a distinction has to be made between different established characters. And what I mean by that is there are certain characters who are part of a linear continuity or story. My main example here being Luke Skywalker from the original trilogy of Star Wars movies, of course. And the second distinction, or the second kind of character, is a character who is not necessarily part of a linear continuity or story. And I'm mainly referring to examples such as Batman and Superman. As with those characters, we have very different interpretations which are a result of a specific time period, and the characters are often reflections of that specific time period or reality. We can also make distinctions between these characters, as there are certain characters who have a limited presence or they have a clear character arc or hero's journey, that of course being Luke Skywalker. And we also have the second part, which is kind of an ever-present character with different and modern interpretations and takes, that of course referring to the characters of Batman and Superman or just comic book characters in general. Well, one of the main questions when it comes to just characters and how they should or should not be approached is what makes a character a character? What makes Luke Skywalker, for example? And there are very basic traits which we can associate with Luke Skywalker. That being that he is an ever optimistic and hopeful farm boy who yearns for adventure, and he becomes a Jedi Knight through practice and discipline and defeats the Emperor by not his skill, but by his belief in his father and by the help of his friends. And there is not a lot of wiggle room as to how to interpret the character of Luke Skywalker, as the character has a very clear arc or a hero's journey in the original trilogy of Star Wars movies. That, although, doesn't rule out the fact that the character can be different further down the line, but that has to be set up and explained in a clear and concise way where it makes sense. But another interesting question would be, what makes Batman, of course Batman being the other type of character who is not part of this linear continuity. And what makes Batman is that his parents get killed in front of him by criminals, and he chooses to become a crime fighter vigilante for the rest of his life. And that's basically it when it comes to Batman. There are of course other traits which we now associate with the character, like that he dresses up like a bat or that his costume is inspired by the look of bats, that he lives in Gotham and he doesn't intentionally kill or murder people, although he doesn't really care about the people that he's fighting against either. And I feel like that the rest is up to the artist to decide what story they want to tell with the character itself, as we look at the different interpretations that we have had. Batman specifically, we have had the Tim Burton Batman on the big screen, we have had the Christopher Nolan one, we are currently having the Zack Snyder and the Matt Reeves interpretation of these characters, and these are very different in and of themselves. And when it comes to these different interpretations, these different takes make the characters relevant for the times that we are currently living in, for example. This way, they don't necessarily disappear from our lives or become old-fashioned in a way. For example, when we're talking about Batman Begins, or even The Dark Knights, Batman doesn't necessarily hold up from a 2021 perspective, as it feels a bit old-fashioned or even outdated, as I have previously mentioned before, when we compare it to the other new interpretations, such as Ben Affleck's Batman and Robert Pattinson's Batman, especially with the former, as the character and its story takes place in our modern times. But the main question of this whole argument or whole topic is can or should these characters be different? And my answer to that is absolutely. But there has to be a reason for that specific change. And one of my main arguments for this topic, or my main questions, is to find out, can Luke Skywalker become a nihilist? Of course, that is what we saw in the new Disney films. And my answer to that is yes, he absolutely can be. But that specific change has to be set up sufficiently and make sense within the context of the whole narrative of the story of Star Wars, not just in an individual piece of film. And you don't necessarily establish it by just giving us one or two flashbacks, but with truly sufficient setups and explanation. And one of my main points to that sudden character change is the Injustice Superman. If you don't know, spoiler alert for the Injustice games, the Injustice Superman is tricked into killing his pregnant wife, while also destroying Metropolis in the process, and he's tricked to do that by the Joker, which sends him over the edge to kill the Joker and become a fascist tyrant in the process. And that take is a completely new take and interpretation for the Injustice universe, which is not part of any previously established lore or universe, therefore it makes sense in the context of the story and the universe. And even just when we're talking about Star Wars itself, can Star Wars be different than this space adventure drama? And to that, I would point out Knights of the Old Republic 2, which takes a rather somber take, or sets a somber tone for the Star Wars universe, but it works, and it takes a deconstructionist approach to the whole Star Wars universe, but it all makes sense in the end. But another question would be, when it comes to these characters, especially when it comes to the other type of the character that I mentioned, is can Batman lose his way and want to murder an innocent being? He absolutely can. But again, it has to be set up sufficiently and make sense within the context of the whole narrative of a story, not just an individual piece. And if you want a whole deep dive on Ben Affleck's Batman's journey, I would highly recommend to check out my Batfleck analysis video for more info on that, which I will link in the description down below. And again, why the character works is because it is a completely new take and interpretation which is not part of any previously established lore, but respects the character's core elements, which I have mentioned before, is that his parents were killed in front of him when he was a child by criminals, and he is waging a war on crime for the rest of his life. And another movie or another piece of media which was a radical change from the comics was the Joker movie from 2019, which in and of itself, as I've mentioned, was a radical change from the origins of the character from the comics itself. But the whole idea and the whole story made sense, that it was well executed and it was a great film in general. And even when we are thinking about the character of Batman, I would highly encourage to check out Darren Aronofsky's Batman Year One script, or even just a video talking about the script, which I will link in the description down below as well. But I probably still haven't really answered the most important question, that being, but how should these established characters be approached for real? And to that I say, with care and passion, in that specific order. Creative and different interpretations of well-established characters are something that I'm always open about, as it encourages the individual to consider other and differing aspects of something they are already familiar with. But when it comes down to it, the reason for the change and the execution makes all the difference in the end. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you have enjoyed it. But what do you think about different interpretations of already well-established characters? Let me know all of your thoughts in the comments down below, and please leave a like if you have enjoyed the video, subscribe for more content like this one, and I will see you in the next one. And until then, remember to keep it insightful.